I hope you're enjoying this relatively cool day. Somewhat rainy too in southeastern New England. Coolest day that we've seen in more than a month. And some action, though, heating up in the tropics. We've got Tropical Storm Dorian, relatively small storm way out there in the eastern Atlantic with winds of 60 miles per hour. And when you look at the projected track for Dorian, somewhat of an eyebrow raiser in the long range, as eventually that storm is forecast to get down to just north of the Caribbean islands. But what is the storm up against as far as atmospheric conditions in the next few days? Well, it just made it through some cooler water, and it's getting into warmer water, more conducive for strengthening of a tropical system, or at least maintaining intensity. That's one of the factors that you look at with a storm like this. Another thing that you would look at, well, would be the wind shear that's out ahead of the storm. And when you do observe that, the storm is in here, and it looks like relatively low wind shear for a little while, and then the wind shear increases once you get closer to the Caribbean islands. So wind shear, not really a huge factor. Some dry air out ahead of the system shown right there. It's not a perfect environment for strengthening with Dorian, and the computer models are not calling for a lot of strengthening in the near term. You see through about 60 hours, pretty wide range from the computer models as far as what to expect from Tropical Storm Dorian, but most tend to just more or less maintain the intensity as a solid tropical storm. Some in the longer range do eventually blow it up into a hurricane 4 or 5 days from now. Others, though, actually weaken it and dissipate it into something less than a tropical storm. Most are clustered somewhere in tropical storm intensity. So getting back to those computer projections, and we'll continue to look at these pretty closely in the coming days, they are clustered very strongly on this track that's basically just north of west for the next several days. The dark red line that you see in there, that is the consensus track of all the different computer models. And again, when you look at the wind chart, seeing most keeping the storm somewhere as keeping Dorian as a tropical storm for the next several days. What is causing Dorian to take this west-northwest track? Well, there's a huge area of high pressure, which is over the central Atlantic, and that ridge is going to force the storm beneath the ridge, so south of the ridge, and it's just going to move. As you can see here, this is the GFS model. Again, it's just one of the computer models, but no real significant strengthening in the next few days. This is now heading into the weekend and into late weekend and early next week, getting just north of the Caribbean islands. Eventually, this particular computer model run, and they do vary greatly from one computer model to the next, and even from run to run with the same computer model. This brings the system into the Bahamas, and then eventually has an impact in the eastern United States. So I would say in the near term, just continue to keep an eye on Dorian, see if it intensifies, see if it weakens over the next few days, see how it handles the environment that it'll be passing through as it takes this long trek over the central Atlantic and heads for probably north of the Caribbean islands by early next week. And there's still plenty of time to watch this storm. It is by no means an imminent threat for anywhere in the eastern United States, but if it does make it down into the Bahamas as a tropical storm with the weather pattern that's in place, it's one that the east coast of the U.S., particularly the southeastern U.S., would have to pay very close attention to.